Welcome to Astral Visionary. Silence in the face of pain is not neutral. It is treachery. Those who disregarded your grief believed they had escaped the conflict. But karma guarantees that no one escapes the judgment. There is something extremely disturbing about the quiet of people who could have helped but chose not to. To the selected ones, reading this, you were tossed into the flames by bullies who lived on your suffering. But what wounded even worse were the cowards who stood by and pretended not to see. They believed that their inactivity would protect them, but being on the sidelines rendered them invisible. But the reality is karma never forgets, and their silence has repercussions. You are referred to be the chosen ones since your hardships have fashioned you into something tougher and sharper. You have borne the weight of betrayal and neglect, and now the balance is shifting in your favor. This video isn't just about justice. It is about recovering your power. The cosmos has a weird way of leveling the playing field, and you deserve to see it happen. Watch this, not out of resentment, but to remind yourself that you are always braver than others who hid behind quiet. This is your time. The number one currency of karma is responsibility, and the debt is past due. Karma has a way of balancing the scales, particularly when responsibility is past due. The cowards who stood aside while you suffered believed they had escaped unharmed. They believed themselves that quiet was safe, and that being uninvolved rendered them blameless. But here is the reality. Every time they disregarded your sorrow, they accumulated karma debt. And now, the bill has come. They lived comfortably in their cocoon, avoiding confrontation and pretending your hardship was not their concern. Meanwhile, you've paid the price psychologically, emotionally, and physically. You carried the weight of bullying, solitude, and betrayal, while they relished the illusory luxury of indifference. They failed to comprehend that responsibility is the currency of karma. It doesn't matter whether they didn't whip their fists or yell obscenities. They chose inactivity, and that's a decision with implications. Every time they turned a blind eye, they added to your misery by feeding the bully's power. Now the rules have changed. The universe has a way of ensuring that people get what they say. So, even though they felt they were planting nothing, karma does not work on their schedule. It waits when people are least prepared. That false feeling of security they clung to is crumbling, forcing them to face what they want to escape. The comfort they once felt is fading away, replaced with the identical fear and vulnerability they disregarded in you. It is poetic justice, not out of vengeance, but because balance requires it. Their quiet was not innocent, it was damaging. And now they'll understand what it's like to shoulder the weight of apathy, just as you did. They can no longer live rent-free in the safety of indifference. Karma has come to collect. Number 2, they were unaware they were next. Those who remained quiet when you needed them most believed they were being clever. They felt that their quiet protected them from the bullies who tortured you. After all, if they didn't intervene or take a side, they wouldn't be targeted, right? Wrong. What they didn't comprehend was that bullies don't respect peaceful people. They do not value neutrality or reward inactivity. Bullies thrive on weakness, and they prefer quiet. By disregarding your anguish, these cowards believed they were avoiding difficulties, but they were simply postponing the inevitable. Bullies perceive quiet onlookers as easy targets. The same individuals who stood aside and watched you suffer the blows are now in your position, facing the fury of the tormentors they avoided addressing. The bullies have not modified their behavior. They have merely switched their emphasis. And now the cowards have no one to defend them since they have never stood up for anybody else. It's a difficult lesson, but one kids must learn. Silence does not purchase immunity. Bullies do not appreciate cowardice. They took advantage of others. Those who disregarded your sorrow were never safe. They were merely the next in line. Their silence was not a defense. It was an invitation, a big neon sign that said, "I won't fight back." Now, they understand what you already knew. It's scary to face a bully alone. Only now, their calls for aid reverberate across the same emptiness they left you in. This karma is not harsh. It is justice. The cowards who believed they were untouchable are now realizing the consequences of inactivity. Their quiet did not protect them. It rendered them vulnerable, and now they're suffering the price. Number 3, the consequences of being a ghost. Cowards often feel that blending into the background makes them invisible, that being out of sight somehow absolves them of guilt. When you needed a shield, someone stepped up and said, "This isn't right." They decided to become ghosts. They did not act. He did not speak. Didn't even recognize your suffering. But vanishing was hardly the escape they expected. In an effort to avoid confrontation, they left you to face the full might of the bullies on your own. They claimed it was not their struggle, telling themselves it wasn't their responsibility to defend you. They didn't recognize their failure to act was not neutral. This was a betrayal. By vanishing away, they strengthened the bullies while leaving you helpless. Now, the ghosts they attempted to become are returning to haunt them. They avoided addressing the dread for you. The fear of stepping in, standing out, or risking anything is now their shadow. That same worry is eating away at them, becoming louder and more persistent as they confront their own challenges. There is no serenity in being a ghost. Silence does not remove guilt, and avoidance does not eliminate consequences. The obligation to act, which they were avoiding, is coming up with them. The shame of their inactivity has taken on a shape that they cannot escape, and now they're tortured by the thought of what they didn't accomplish. When it was most important, they failed to act as a shield. Being a ghost does not imply you vanish. It indicates you are stuck by the weight of what you have left behind. Their time to slip into the background is past. Karma is pulling them into the light, so they may face the consequences of their cowardice. Number 4, cowards usually mistake neutrality for innocence. Cowards frequently believe that being neutral absolves them of responsibility. They convince themselves that they were not a part of the issue since they did not actively contribute to the damage. However, they fail to see that being neutral in the face of injustice does not imply innocence. It is a covert act of complicity. By remaining mute, they chose not to stand up. They supported the oppressor when you were injured, neglected, or humiliated. Their failure to act was not innocuous. It fueled the bullies. Every second they stood there and did nothing, they conveyed a quiet message that what was going on was okay. They persuaded themselves that their hands were clean. But karma sees through the act. Excuses such as, "It wasn't my fight," or "I didn't want to make things worse," will fall flat when the reality is revealed. Neutrality is not the same as safety. It's an accomplice wearing a coward's cloak. And now the reckoning starts. Karma does not need big statements or huge gestures. It moves softly, allowing people to experience the consequences of their actions in ways they cannot avoid. The discomfort they formerly evaded has become their reality, and no amount of denial will protect them from the repercussions. Their neutrality was a mask they wore to avoid conflict, but it's one that karma takes away. What remains is the truth. They were not bystanders. They were facilitators. They stood in the shadow of injustice, believing they might dodge the storm, only to discover too late that their inactivity had put them directly in its path. Neutrality is never innocent, and karma assures that those who hesitate to take a stance will ultimately find themselves on the wrong side of history. Number 5, empathy is a muscle that has atrophied. Empathy is like a muscle. It becomes stronger the more it is used. To properly care for others, you must put up effort, fortitude, and the capacity to move outside of yourself. But the cowards who ignored your anguish allowed that muscle to wither away. They chose indifference over action. Ignore your pain. They convinced themselves that it was not their issue. Each time they disregarded your difficulties, their sympathy dwindled. Karma has come to test their fortitude, and they are falling beneath the weight of their own hardships. Why? Because empathy isn't simply about helping others. It's also what empowers us to fight our own fights by declining to intervene when we needed them. They deprived themselves of the emotional strength required to handle life's unavoidable challenges. They've never practiced sticking up for others. So how can they expect to advocate for themselves now? When karma sends its share of pain, they're left feeling alienated and powerless, just as they abandoned you. They now were the anxiety and vulnerability that you felt. However, without the empathy they choose to ignore, they lack the power to overcome it. They never developed the emotional fortitude to confront hardship because they spent so long believing it did not exist. Their weakened empathy leaves them empty, unable to connect or seek help when they need it the most. The lesson is severe, but important. Ignoring others' misery does not make you immune to your own. It merely assures that you confront it alone, unprepared, and without the means to persevere. Karma does not forget. Finally, the weight of their apathy will be their own responsibility to bear. Number 6, ignoring suffering does not make you immune to it. Ignoring others' misery does not make you immune to your own. Those who turn their backs on your pain believe they were secure, that by remaining out of it, they may escape the unpleasantness of fighting. They persuaded themselves that suffering was not their duty, and that if they turned away, it would not affect them. However, grief has a way of spreading like a fire that thrives on stillness. It has now burnt its way into their life. They felt that ignoring your issues was a risk-free decision. They didn't realize that their apathy helped the bullies to become bolder. What's the problem? The agony will become an uncontrollable force as it grows in intensity. They may have claimed it wasn't their issue, but suffering has no respect for borders. By condoning brutality via quiet, they unintentionally drew its shadow into their own garden. Now karma has delivered that anguish to their door. There's no avoiding it. There will be no denying it does not exist. The problem they believed they'd avoided is now staring them in the face, and they are ill-equipped to deal with it. They spent so long avoiding suffering that they never learned to tolerate it. The anxiety and sorrow they disregarded in you have now manifested in their own lives. This leaves them defenseless and exposed. Ignoring someone's misery does not result in safety. It produces a ticking time bomb. Pain is a force that requires attention, and when it's ignored, it finds other methods to express itself. Those who abandoned you in your problems are now discovering that pain, once ignored, does not go away. It expands and grows, finally reaching those who believed they were untouchable. The reckoning isn't harsh. It's inevitable. Number 7. The universe saw something you couldn't. They believed they had avoided judgment by ignoring your misery and behaved as if it was not their issue. They expected their stillness to fade into the background, unnoticed and forgotten. But the cosmos does not work that way. It sees things you can't. Every time they looked aside, they avoided entering. They mumbled excuses to themselves to explain their inactivity. The cosmos keeps track, and karma operates on its own timeline. Even when no one called them out, their quiet was never benign. They may have assumed they were off the hook since no one challenged them. But the cosmos does not forget. It observes, it waits, and it understands when the moment is perfect to act. Karma is not limited by human timetables or convenience. It brings justice when it is least anticipated and most deserved. While they seem to be unaware of your difficulties, they were scripting their own destiny. Their inactivity was not insignificant, even if it seemed that no one noticed at the time. The cosmos does not need public acknowledgement to balance its balances. It perceives the reality as it is, regardless of appearances. Karma is now playing out, and they are paying the price for their apathy. They're learning the hard way that disregarding someone's misery does not absolve them of accountability. It intensifies it. They had the opportunity to stand up, be human, and show even the least amount of compassion. But they took the easy way out. They didn't comprehend that the cosmos never looks away. Their judgment is not about vengeance. It's about restoring equilibrium. They may have deceived themselves, but they never tricked the cosmos. Number 8. False comforts have expiration dates. Cowardice often disguises itself as self-preservation. For others who turn a blind eye to your pain, their inactivity seemed like a barrier, keeping them from becoming involved, risking conflict, or experiencing the discomfort of empathy. Ignoring your sorrow became their comfortable zone, a frail cocoon in which they told themselves they were secure. However, comfort constructed on the shoulders of someone else's pain is only transient. They didn't comprehend that their shield was not formed of strength or determination. It was constructed out of dread, fear of taking the initiative of standing out, and of doing the right thing when it counted the most. And dread, no matter how terrible it feels, cannot keep the weight of karma at bay indefinitely. Now the fishers are revealing that the false feeling of security they wrapped themselves in is crumbling. Karma does not forget people's decisions to protect themselves at the cost of others. The weight of their quiet, indifference, and failure to act has become too heavy for their frail shield to sustain. They believe they were safe since they didn't say anything, get involved, or produce a disturbance. However, karma does not care about their reasons or falsehoods. They told themselves to sleep better at night. It only sees truth. They failed to respond when they were most needed. Now they are exposed, unprotected, and forced to face the repercussions of their inactivity. That illusory comfort on which they depended has expired, and there is no longer any need to hide behind it. Karma is unrelenting, and it has a way of teaching us things. They avoided learning on their own. Their cowardly cover has crumbled, and the reckoning they sought to escape is staring them in the face. Number 9. You were the exam. They failed badly. Life is full with challenges that shape who we are and what we stand for. Those who disregarded you when you needed them the most were given a clear opportunity to do the right thing. However, they failed badly. It wasn't about taking a side or becoming embroiled in a battle. It was only demonstrating fundamental human decency. But they decided to turn away, to hide behind their comfort, to pretend that your sorrow was not their concern. And now failure isn't simply a wasted chance. It's a reality they can't avoid. Their punishment is not based on vengeance or revenge. It is about justice. Anger is not required for karma to manifest itself. It just requires equilibrium. Their inability to act when you needed them has now come full circle. And the cosmos does not seek permission to restore justice. They failed the exam. They were intended to demonstrate strength, bravery, and empathy. Instead, they demonstrated fear, cowardice, and a lack of accountability. They believed they could evade the consequences of their inactivity. They didn't comprehend that life keeps score and that neglecting to stand up for others always results in unexpected consequences. Karma is no longer punishing people just for being harsh. It teaches them a lesson. They failed to take it seriously the first time. They were supposed to pass the exam, but they failed. Justice does not need reason. It just requires the truth. The fact is that they failed when they had the opportunity to succeed. Now they'll experience the consequences of their failure. Number 10. Karma is not a villain. It is a mirror. Karma is not a malevolent force seeking to harm people. It's more like a mirror. It does not cause pain. It reflects it. Their current pain is not the result of a harsh deed. It's just their own indifference being reflected to them. A mirror of the apathy they previously chose. They stood by and watched while you suffered. They had no idea that by refusing to participate, they were setting seeds for their own future reckoning. Now, the emptiness they neglected in you has returned to haunt them, and they have only themselves to blame. They never realized that being mute in the face of someone else's sorrow does not solve the issue. It multiplies it, transforming it into something that will ultimately make its way back to you. The cosmos does not have to be cool. It only needs to show them the repercussions of their own decisions. They failed to intervene when you needed them, and now the indifference they once tolerated is returning, forcing them to confront the same chilly isolation they permitted you to suffer. What they are experiencing right now is not punishment. It's just a matter of cause and effect. The mirror of karma does not lie. It reveals who they really were when they failed to be there for you. And now they must live with that reflection, experiencing the same neglect that they so carelessly ignored. Karma is not out to get them. It just shows people the reality about their activities, whether they like it or not. Number 11. Your bullies sowed the seeds, but then watered them. The cowards who remained quiet did not openly abuse you, but their inactivity contributed significantly to the cruelty by refusing to speak out and claiming your anguish was not their concern. They granted the bullies greater power. Their silence was not neutral. It was a green light, a permission document that permitted the bullies to proceed. Every time they remained silent, they sowed the seeds of your agony, instilling confidence in those who decided to harm you. They may not have swung the bat themselves, but they passed it on, giving the bullies the confidence to hit without fear of repercussions. The truth is that every time someone sits by and watches injustice occur, they become complicit. They may not have been directly involved in the abuse, but their failure to interfere exacerbated the situation. They failed to confront the bullies and say this isn't right, or to defend you when you were weak. In doing so, they unintentionally strengthened those committing the damage. As retribution plays out, the cowards face a terrible reality. Their quiet was never a shield. It did not protect them. It merely made them a part of the issue. The bullies may have delivered the fists, but the cowards created the climate in which those punches could fall. And now, as the seeds of their own failure begin to blossom, they realize the consequences of turning a blind eye when they had the opportunity to intervene. Number 12. They now grasp the cost of not my issue. They believed that being uninvolved would keep them safe, that by stating it wasn't my issue, they could escape the complexity of dispute and accountability. But what they didn't comprehend was that they were choosing to look the other way every time. Each time they ignored someone else's misery, they were accruing a debt that they would ultimately have to repay. Karma never forgets those moments of apathy, and now it's teaching them how everything works. Not my issue. Each second adds up. It's not just a pass. It's the accumulation of lost chances to speak out, aid others, and do the right thing. Now the mound of neglected moments is tumbling down on them. What they believed was a safe distance from responsibilities has now become their weight to bear. Their indifference has resulted in repercussions that they can no longer ignore. Karma does not punish people out of spite. It holds people responsible for the simple act of doing nothing when they might have made a difference by claiming it wasn't their concern. They allowed it to escalate into an issue they couldn't ignore. Now it's in their face, and they realize that avoiding engagement doesn't protect them from the consequences. It welcomes it. The fact is that there is no such thing as neutrality in the face of injustice. Choosing to remain uninvolved is still an option. And now they're discovering the hard way that every time they said, "not my problem," it became a burden they couldn't handle. Finally, the reality is simple. Those who stood by and ignored your grief are now experiencing the consequences of their quiet. They may have believed their cowardice would keep them safe, but it just made them complicit. Karma is not about vengeance. It is about balance, and it is revealing precisely what they choose to overlook. Those who refused to step up when you needed them the most are now discovering that inactivity has a cost. But this is where you stand out. You are the chosen one in this narrative, the one who persevered while others did not. You didn't deserve to suffer, but you've come out stronger, smarter, and more resilient. You didn't need them to stand up for you because you discovered your own voice and courage. Now, karma is doing the hard labor, teaching others who watch from the sidelines a lesson they would not have learned on their own. Their actions, or lack thereof, do not define you. You are characterized by your capacity to rise above, persevere, and recognize that your value is not dependent on the thoughts or actions of the cowardly. The anguish they inflicted is no longer yours to bear. It is theirs now, and when they learn their lesson, you enter a future where their shadows have no place. Remember that you were the one who kept going while others stopped behind. You are the one who learned the hard way, but ended up with something they will never have. Strength, resilience, and the insight to never accept the quiet of the cowardly. You are the chosen one because you refuse to give up. Allow their karma to unfold as you stride ahead stronger than ever. The past does not define you. Where you rise from it does. Continue ahead, since your adventure is far from finished. God bless you.